Hello, everyone. My name is Joyce, and I'm the founder of I Am Art House, a nonprofit organization that supports youth development initiatives and emerging artists globally. So, thank you all so much for coming today. And we are so excited to be hosting Addison Bryant for his solo exhibition. Addison is a senior attending James Madison University. And Lindsay, if you could move to the next slide. Thanks. And he is from Rhino, Virginia. He's studying in the School of Art and Design there. So we're really excited to be having him share his work today. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Addison.
Thank you, Joyce. I am at James Madison University right now. I'm in Harrisonburg, and got a vaccination shot last night, so I've been better, to be honest. So if I sound unenthusiastic, trust me, that's the only reason. I'm super excited to be here. Yeah, I want to thank you, Joyce, and everyone at Art House. This is super exciting. And I guess let's get started. If you want to move to the next slide. I'm going to start with this. When I first got into photography, it was a lot of nature stuff. My grandparents took me and my sister on trips to state parks. We eventually visited every single state park in Virginia, and I just saw so many cool things that that's kind of what got me into photography. I would bring my camera along, and this is in the Great Dismal Swamp, which is uh, on the border between North Carolina and Virginia. It's got a super interesting history. It's a very, very mysterious place, and I wanted to capture that with this picture. And I'm mostly going to be showing more recent stuff, but I wanted to go in chronological order and just sort of move through, I guess, how my journey as an artist has evolved and how my work has evolved. These are from one of my film classes, experimental black and white. We worked with a few different film cameras and different types of film. Uh, Double exposures were one of my favorite things that we learned there. I actually did these completely blind. So the way this works is I shot a whole roll of film of just sort of nature stuff. It didn't have to necessarily be a well composed shot. It could just be leaves on the ground or something. And after I'd filled up the whole roll, I would rewind it and I would shoot a whole reel of my friends and just do portraits. And I kind of tried to keep track in my head of which frames had which stuff on it so I could decide where to line things up and which way I wanted people facing. Because wherever dark spots are in the second exposure is what allows the first exposure to come through. So like in this middle one here, the silhouette of the face was very dark, and that's why you see the trees behind it. And this is just from a continuous strip of film, and you can see the black bar through the middle shows that I didn't line up my frames right when I was rewinding the film, but I actually really like how it turned out this way. It almost seemed intentional, but I was really excited about the use, and that's sort of what made me realize you could do a lot more with photography than, just shooting nature. This is another one from the same series. This is my friend Corinne. Um, the second picture of her was actually taken inside, and then the first picture of the plants was taken at the JMU Arboretum. We have a really beautiful area with all kinds of trees and plants and a pond, and I go there a lot for inspiration and for photos. Here's some more double exposures. On the left is a statue of Mary Draper Ingalls in Radford, Virginia, and she was just such a powerful and imposing figure that I knew I had to do something with that. And the second exposure that you see inside her is actually a shot of a lighting fixture store that I took through their window after they had closed. And I just thought it was a really interesting sort of contrast between this natural and artificial, and I guess the conceptual associations with having a light inside her. And then on the right is another one. I actually took this with a Holga, which is a cheap plastic camera that's nearly impossible to get to work. There were some kids in my class that made really beautiful photos with these, but out of the whole roll of film, this was the only picture I had that turned out. It was a really frustrating process, but I'm glad I at least got one picture. This was taken at a statue garden that's in Harrisonburg. They sell statues, and what you don't see is that these statues are actually really small, probably only a foot or so tall. And I just thought it made a really interesting subject if you get down low and sort of look at it from their eye level. And I like the contrast and sort of putting these two photos together. I think it's a really interesting diversity and the mood you get from it, and just the way they're looking down in this picture and looking up in the other one. I just feel such an emotional difference from that, and I don't know. It's interesting. I've never thought that a mass produced concrete statue like that would make an interesting subject, but that was a really interesting place to shoot. These were taken in Radford, Virginia. Um, there's a lot of places closing down. There's buildings closing down. You see sort of abandoned cars in some places, and I've always been interested in this sort of stuff as subjects, and it's sort of a timeless feel. Like you don't know if this photo was taken now or 50 years ago. On the right is a phone book that I
Addison, I'm having trouble hearing you. I don't know if that's just me or Joyce. Can you hear him at all?
No, I can't either. I think maybe the connection.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you now. Okay.
Good.
Okay, sorry. Do you want me to go to the next slide now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
This is another film photo that was taken.
Sorry, Addison, we can't hear you again.
There's a lot of farms up there. So yeah, I was late for work a lot because I would just stop and sort of wander around looking for things to take pictures of. This one is actually digital. I said film photography, but it's digital. I know, artists are liars. Um, this is taken inside an abandoned house. It's pretty close to where I live in Southwest Virginia. I think they make really interesting subjects because you want to piece together what happened there, or why nobody's taking care of the house, or who lived there. I don't know. They've always held a lot of mystery and intrigue for me. This series I shot with one of my friends, McKenna. She is a super skilled artist. She paints, she draws, and she makes masks. And she made this especially horrific goat mask. And one time she came up to visit me while I was working on a project, and I was like, we have to do something with this. So we sort of put together a series of photos that were loosely based on Appalachian folklore. I had a big book of sort of local legends and Appalachian mythology when I was a kid, and there was one that stuck with me about the devil transforming into a goat and meeting you at the crossroads. That always creeped me out, and so that's sort of loosely based on this. Same thing going on here. Rubber pig mask and smoke bombs. We got some weird looks, for sure. This is the first image I wanted to show from the projections series. It's kind of a transition from black and white into color. This was a sort of experimental technique that I figured out by accident. I believe I figured it out when I knocked over my camera during a long exposure, and the result I thought was pretty cool. So I realized that what a lot of people have done in the past is move light sources during a long exposure, what's called light painting. And a lot of that's been done. So I thought it was a good idea to sort of flip it around and move the camera instead of the light source. So what's happening here is I'm zooming in and stopping and zooming in and stopping, sort of stuttering the zoom. So that's why you see these phantom images that go to the next slide.
I did. It must not be loading right now. It might take a while.
Can everyone else see it? Because I have the PowerPoint pulled up. Oh, I got it. So these are some of my favorites from the series. The building on the left, theater in Charlottesville, and then on the right is a restaurant in Harrisonburg. And I do use the same technique on the left as the last image you guys saw. On the right, I'm actually just very slowly zooming in the process of taking a long exposure. Here's some more. There's a detail shot, or not a detail shot, but another shot of the Babylon restaurant on the right, and then a piercing and tattoo shop on the left. And this one, the tattoo sign is the only image that I actually manipulated digitally after taking it. I essentially just copied and pasted. So I would take it as far back as it could go with the camera, and then I would copy and paste until it's just going on infinitely. There's a car lot. I think what I like about these is they sort of recreate the effect that neon has on our psychology. When we see them, they just pop out, and I think physically making it pop out in the image was really cool. Neon is it's sort of not a divine experience, but it's almost got like the same effect as stained glass in a church. And I don't know, that kind of makes sense for America that neon signs are our version of stained glass. Pilot Mountain, this is a gas station on top of the mountain where I live back home. It's sort of the only business within 10 or 15 miles. So you see a lot of locals there. And we actually live on the side of that mountain, and we have a bunch of bridges leading up to it and a creek. So the creek actually floods pretty frequently when it rains, and this gas station is kind of our only lifeline there. This you just get a weird feeling from. It's a hard feeling to describe, but it's sort of the feeling of being at a bus stop late at night and there's no more buses to pick you up. But I used long exposure and moved around a little bit, sort of create these ghostly figures. And these two were my favorite from the series. More projection on the right. And then on the left, I took this one by setting up a barbershop mirror. I bought a mirror from a barbershop after they closed. It was a good deal. And I set it up on the side of a hill facing the sunset. And then I put the camera off to one side and placed myself off to the other one and held a remote in my hand. That's how I took that one. I'm not sure if it reads or not. It's a very odd image.
Can you see the slide, Addison?
Yeah, it's still on the same one.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I got it.
Okay.
This was my favorite from the projection series just because it's so dramatic and you have all these other little lights that are dragging off. And the moon in the corner, I think, was just such a nice touch. I don't think I actually noticed that until after I was taking the picture. Yeah, just the drag. I still can't see it. Oh, there we go. This is from the Dancescape series. This is a project we did with my performance for the lens class. This was super fun. I loved doing this, and I think everyone else in the class enjoyed it too. We got paired dancers from the Virginia Repertory Dance Company. You should take the sort of forms and gestures of dancing and put them in unexpected contexts. And there was a lot of groups that were only paired with one dancer. I might have been the only one that was able to work with two. So I wanted to take advantage of that and just sort of focus on their chemistry and how their bodies work together to create completely new forms. And they brought a lot of ideas to the table. I honestly cannot take credit for most of this because they were super creative and they just sort of knew what to do. Like if I was having trouble putting something into words or if I had an idea, they picked up on that and like carried it to something it wouldn't have been before. So these were really cool. I would love to do this again. More from the series. Yeah, we're shooting in a laundromat, obviously, and I think the washing machines kind of gave us a really unique opportunity to play with those forms. So I'm going to show some of my collages now. Some of them I made more for fun. So you don't have to read too deep into them. Some of them are dumb, but I wanted to show them anyway because it's what I like to make. The one on the left is made with a background from a Life magazine from the 50s or 60s that was about the birth of Earth, like the primordial soup and all that. And it just had these super dramatic pictures of like meteors hitting this lava and these sort of early mountains sinking into the sea. and I forget the name of the artist. I should really find that, but they're really beautiful pictures, and I just combined that with some, I think it was an advertisement in the same magazine. And then on the right, also working with Life magazines, and the background came from a National Geographic, I think. Probably my favorite. Actually cut out the helmet and replaced it with a vinyl record in an advertisement. And then these sort of multiple Earths that you see came from that magazine about the birth of the Earth. And then we have I think it was some fashion models here, and the World Sweepstakes, another advertisement. This was, I think, my most recent one. And for this one, I decided to work with pulp fiction covers. So just sort of the old torn up books that you find at thrift stores. That's where I find a lot of this stuff. I go to thrift stores and vintage stores. A lot of the time they'll have old magazines. And this one was made of pulp fiction covers, sort of sci-fi stuff, fantasy, very lowbrow fiction, but they have some really cool illustrations. This one I made by hand instead of digitally, so I wanted to give it a much more choppy, sort of torn up feel. That's one of the things I like to do is put down layers and then peel them back up. I think it creates a really interesting depth. And this was my most, like, I was looking down on this one, I was like, this is just so American. This is the most heavily American piece of art I've created, because I forget what magazine it was, but every ad in like the 60s and 70s just like cigarettes, whiskey, Coca-Cola, and yeah, you don't have much diversity to work with there. And there's some pretty awful ads in those magazines, I should add. So I don't necessarily want to endorse them. I created this in my screen printing class. So I was still wanting to do something with collage, but sort of translating it to screen printing. So I looked at old matchbooks and matchboxes and put them together. For this one, I didn't really chop things up. I just sort of was focused on form alone and uh, the forms of the text, and just sort of combining that to make something new. But I think it turned out really well. I would. So you do the first layer, you pull the ink down, you have blue, and then you have the next layer where you burn everything that you want to be orange into the screen, pull down the orange and the yellow, and so on. This is another screen print. This one was a little more serious, where I wasn't just thinking about form alone. I actually kind of wanted to say something with it. And as you can see, it's got a little more variety. It's not just sort of taking things as they are and organizing them together. And I'm kind of combining things and including a little bit of my own uh, mark making in there. So there's a combination here. There's this sort of disturbing ad for nerve pills that I don't know why, that just made me die laughing when I found it. The giant frog, and how this is somehow supposed to be comforting and make you want to buy nerve pills. So it's like I have to use that. And then we have a picture of Moloch, who was a pagan god of sacrifice, child sacrifice, and was most likely mythological, being used as propaganda in the medieval ages to make certain people look bad. They worship Moloch or whatever. But it's become a symbol, used in art and media a lot. The movie Metropolis, there's this famous scene of all these workers just charging into the mouth of this great machine that's they introduced baby formula to developing countries in Africa, and told mothers that they could replace breastfeeding with it, which ended up killing hundreds of babies. And in various other places around the world, their business practices have killed people. And I'm sort of making the comparison here that it's equivalent to sort of sacrificing children for profits instead of for religion. A sort of modern Moloch. And I just wanted to finish up with a little bit of what I'm working on now. So this is a silkscreen print, and one of my biggest influences on what I'm working on now is the Works Progress Administration New Deal art in the 1940s. Obviously, FDR established a bunch of government programs, so you had artists working for the government, making all these posters promoting health and safety, and some really fantastic artists got started through that program. And it's just like my dream that this would come back someday. So this is sort of my vision of a modern WPA poster, and I'm turning this into a whole series where I'm sort of adapting it from economic depression to the pandemic. So I have this one. I'm working on one right now that's promoting vaccines and getting vaccinated. And I'm actually selling these with the Creative Action Network. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but it's the organization that created all the Green New Deal posters. But I have partnered with them. I just found out yesterday that you can buy this on their website, and a portion of the proceeds will go to supporting worker rights. And I think that might be it.
Thank you so much, Addison, for sharing us all of your incredible work. And we're just really excited to have you join us today. So everyone, now we're going to transition to a time of Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask your question personally. I have a question for you, Addison, actually. What pieces are you currently working on or hoping to work on in the future as you're wrapping up your degree at JMU? So what projects are you working on or hoping to work on in the future as you're wrapping up your degree at JMU?
Sorry, I missed part of that. What am I planning on working on in the future?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, right now I have the screen printing going on, and I'm in so many different classes right now, and I'm just torn between all these projects that it's so hard to think about the future and what I really want to do. But I think I'd like to turn that series into something bigger, or maybe just broadening my horizons and making these sort of posters for various different topics and subjects. I don't really have any long-term visions, but I'm actually applying for an artist residency in Dry Tortugas National Park. And if that goes through, I'll be doing nature photography there. But I don't know, it's all very up in the air right now. Just kind of waiting to see what happens.
Thanks, Addison. Does anyone else have any other questions they want to ask Addison? I have one more question. Who would you say are some of your biggest like inspirations in terms of like your art practice?
One of my biggest inspirations, especially for a lot of the photography, if you look back at some of the more lonely, very mysterious ones, Edward Hopper was a major influence for me. He just nails that feeling of loneliness and sort of urban isolation, and how architecture and the way towns are constructed sort of puts us in that box and makes us feel that way. Liminal spaces, that sort of thing. As far as photography, obviously the nature stuff, Ansel Adams. He was the only artist I knew when I started taking pictures, so he was a big influence there. A lot of writers actually sort of influenced. If you look at like the Southern Gothic photography and the abandoned houses and film stuff. What was I gonna say? William Faulkner and Cormac McCarthy. The feeling that I get from their literature is sort of what I was trying to emulate with those. I'm trying to think of other artists. I have so many artists that I have saved and I look at in my phone, and then I just try to think of their names and it just goes blank. But if I think of more, I'll get back to you.
Addison, there's a question in the chat from Corinne. What are your thoughts on digital versus film and color versus black and white?
Corinne is actually my photo professor and my advisor. So I've heard of Hank for a lot of these photos. Now I feel like I'm on the spot. Digital versus film. Let's see. I'm trying to think about which class he taught. Digital, I feel like is open-ended, so you can do so much with it, but it's almost too much freedom. You know, like when you can do anything, you don't know what to do. And I learned that through the film classes, where you're under such strict limitations. Like, you can't take photos if it's too bright, you can't take photos if it's too dark. You have to stay so still, and you can't let any light into your camera. So those constrictions actually make you more creative, in my opinion. But I don't know, they definitely both have their advantages. As you can see from my work, like there's obviously a huge difference in the sort of subjects I'm dealing with and the work that I'm doing, depending on if it's black and white film or color. You know, I think capturing light and all these neon signs and stuff like that only really works with color, but black and white has advantages too. It sort of makes everything look timeless and makes it look fancier. So there's that too. But no, it's hard to say. They definitely both have their advantages. Thank you, Corinne. Thank you, Rebecca. That means a lot.
Addison, I have a question for you. I love painting and drawing. Is that something that you've kind of dipped your toe in over the course of like your studio art major classes? Is that something that you've found that you enjoy? I mean, obviously photography is something that like you're really good at and that's like your passion, but I was just curious if you had any thoughts on kind of the other side of two-dimensional art.
Yeah, I've been drawing for a long time. Um, I'm not quite as confident in my skill at drawing. I feel like photography and collaging, it's all kind of cheating. Um, I also like to combine painting and collaging. So sort of layering magazines with oil paint and stuff like that. But yeah, it's more something I use as as sketches or maybe smaller components of a bigger work. But yeah, I do have a few full scale finished paintings. And Joyce asked, "What is my favorite piece?" That's hard. Um, I might actually go with the Wetzel's Seeds, the, the sort of neon sign that's popping out. Um, it would either be that or the World Sweepstakes collage. And the funny thing is, I'm realizing now is they have a very similar sort of aesthetic, even though one's photography and one's collage. But just that dragging of these brightly colored neon trails is, I think, what I like about it so much. I would go with those two out of these works at least. Yeah. Also mentioned that any of the silkscreen prints that you see on here, I have the actual original prints of with the ink and everything. So if you would like to buy that instead of going through the website and getting a digital print, I have those available. If you want to buy anything, just shoot me a DM on Instagram. It's usually how I handle that stuff. I'm not selling prints for more than $30. I want everyone to be able to afford one if they want one. Yeah, there's sort of a pricing guideline. It's kind of a range, but you ultimately get to choose your own price. So really excited to be on that platform. It gives you a lot of freedom.
Does anyone else have any final questions for Addison? Alrighty, well, thank you so much, Addison, for once again sharing your work and for um, for sharing your work with us and sharing more about your process and everything. And best wishes to you. And thank you everyone for attending today. Next week we have an artist joining us. Her name is Irina from Lithuania. So we hope you can also join next week as well. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much, everyone.